Thanks so much for that introduction. It's really fun to be here. I just wish it was as warm here as it is where you all are. I wish I could be with you in person. So I'm just going to try and share my screen. Can I get a little like thumbs up? All right, great. That you can see my slides. Great. So as Ellen said, I am here calling in from the Office of Digital Humanities today to talk to you about funding. Also joining me today is Bria Page. Bria is an intern in the Office of Digital Humanities, and she's also a graduate student in a PhD student in English at Rutgers. So great to have her here as well. And I might as well pitch while I'm at it that our current summer internship program is open. It's a paid summer internship program for undergraduate and graduate students. In all of the offices of the NEH are hiring, so let your students know. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I am calling in today, as I said, from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Usually when I present, I like to talk about where I am. Here I am on the mall, two blocks from the National Mall. And then there we are, the Office of Digital Humanities on the 4th floor. But I'm actually calling in from Knoxville, Tennessee today with my chickens are right in front of me over here. That's how many people we have on our team. So that they stand in for us today. I imagine that many of you know what the NEH is, but just a little refresher, we are one of several federal agencies whose job is to take taxpayer dollars and distribute it back to the public in the form of funding for humanities research, teaching, outreach, public engagement. In the grand scope of federal funding, we are very small. I made this for high school students, but I think it's cute, so I always share it. You can see how much the NIH gets in funding compared to the NEH. We look real small, but we are not nothing. Our budget is around $160 million a year. And last year, because of NEH, because of the pandemic, we distributed an additional I think it was $75 million in funds, in relief funding. And we are expecting another 100 million, 130 million more that we'll be distributing this year. So we do have some money, and it is our job to give it to you. So my presentation today is going to have 3 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what are the digital humanities. I'm going to talk about navigating DH at the NEH, and then I'm going to talk about how we can help you develop your digital projects. So I should start just by saying, I don't care how you define the digital humanities. I know this is a joke. I know many of you in the field are familiar with this question. You can define DH however you want it to be, unless you want us to give you money, in which case you have to understand how we're defining it, right? And so that's really the focus of what I'm trying to talk about today. One thing that you may not know is that the NEH has been funding digital projects from our very inception. So we were founded in 1965 by Lyndon Johnson. And in 1966, in our first call for grants, we called for humanistically oriented computer research. So since 1966, long before DH was a thing, the NEH has been funding this kind of work. In 1967, we gave out our first digital humanities grant, which was $6,320 to the University of Pittsburgh. We have been funding various kinds of digital projects ever since, like this really cool movie that you can watch online, experimenting with hypertext from the 1970s. And then in the 90s, things changed for us. So 1995, the digital humanities becomes a thing, right? The web starts expanding into higher education. And at that very time, Congress slashed the NEH budget by 40%, and they cut our humanities, science, and technology program. So at the moment where digital humanities was starting to form or solidify, our funding was cut. And since then, we've sort of been reinvesting. So in 2000, a report was issued calling for more humanities work at the intersection of science and technology. And one of the people who authored that report is the current director of the Office of Digital Humanities, my boss. That report called on the NEH to fund the intersection of technology and the humanities in research and education. And it was followed by an ACLS report in 2006 calling on something similar. And those reports are what led to the foundation of the digital humanities funding at the NEH as it currently exists. It was out of this ACLS report that in 2006, the NEH launched the Office of Digital Humanities, which is where I currently work. And the Office of Digital Humanities supports two kinds of projects that enhance experimental methods, and then projects that examine the history of digital culture. I have to apologize. I was saying earlier, all of my slide designs got distorted like 15 minutes before this talk. So I tried frantically to fix them right before I got online, but it looks like this one isn't quite there yet. So that's sort of the big picture. Since 1967, we have been funding research and teaching at the intersection of digital and technology, both the development of digital methods and also the study of digital culture. Today, the Office of Digital Humanities priorities, we have 4 priorities. We fund experimental and computationally based methods, techniques, and infrastructure. We fund the history, criticism, and philosophy of digital culture. We fund evaluative studies that investigate the practices and impact of digital scholarship. And then we fund the support of the use of technology to increase access to humanities scholarship. So these 4 different platforms at the intersection of humanities and technology. But the biggest change that's happened since that 2006 report that led to the founding of the Office of Digital Humanities and today is that we are no longer the only office that funds digital projects. In fact, every single office at the NEH now supports the use of digital technology because, as I think this conversation shows, we are all doing our humanities work through digital interfaces, right? So we fund across the NEH. We fund scholarship, we fund infrastructure, we fund pedagogy, we fund publishing, and we fund professional development. So I told you that I was going to define digital humanities at the NEH. I think that we really define DH in 3 ways. We think that digital humanities is the use of digital technology to advance humanistic inquiry. DH is the use of humanistic methods to understand digital culture. And it's the use of digital technology to educate and to provide access to humanistic knowledge. And you can fund all of that work through the NEH. And then the question, that you have to ask yourself is, where do you fit in that really big picture, right? So the answer to that is not necessarily going to be easy. We have more than 15 grant programs at the NEH that cover digital projects of various kinds. So when I prepared this talk, one idea I had was I could just talk you through every single one of these 15 projects. That was not a good idea. We also, we have these different categories for different kinds of funding that we give. So I could like walk you through a tree diagram of all the different funding, but again, there's a lot of content here. It's very overwhelming. So what I decided to do today is just to take some time to share some projects that represent some of the kinds of areas that the NEH is intervening in terms of digital work, in the hopes that you might see yourself in there. This is not comprehensive, there's a lot missing, but it's just sort of trying to get you thinking about where you fit. All of these projects are from Florida, with one exception where I had to go to Georgia. But most of the projects are from Florida. So tried to get some regionally specific projects here. So the first set of projects are about engaging critically with digital technology. So maybe, you're interested in using digital technology to study literature or history, developing new digital methods for scholarship. The Digital Humanities Advancement Grant is still our most public digital humanities grant program. An example of a digital humanities advancement grant was this project from the University of South Florida, reconstructing the first humanities computing center, and they got, I think it was like $90,000 to support the digital recreation of the laboratory of digital humanities scholar Roberto Busa. So what this project is doing is it's bringing together, the study of digital culture and the use of digital methods. Another way that you can fund your digital humanities research would be through one of our fellowship programs. We have a number of programs that are for individual scholars to fund your research, and one of those is the Summer Stipends program. Here's an example of funding that went to the University of West Florida, where a scholar received several months of research funds to analyze and digitally preserve 54 skeletons from Oplantis, and then create these digital models in a project website so you can learn about those archaeological artifacts. And then a third way that you can support digital humanities research at the NEH is if you're specifically interested in funding, in studying access. So if what your question really is, how can we improve access to collections and materials, you might apply to our research and development program. So here's an example of this. This is from my one foray into Georgia, from Georgia Tech. This is developing a way to create digital access to archives of puppets, right? So to digital artifacts. People also use this particular grant program to experiment with different ways of producing metadata, different ways of organizing digital repositories and things like that. So that's sort of, those are 3 examples of how we fund, what you might call digital humanities research, right? But maybe your priority is not so much experimenting with digital methodologies, but it's actually giving digital access to humanities content that already exists. There's a couple of ways that we support that. So one example, we have the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources Program. Here's a grant that went to UF, cataloging Franciscan missions of La Florida. And this is a development of an online archive. So the archaeological materials exist. This is money to put those materials online. I find a lot of people that come to me with digital projects, I end up sending to this program because it is so, there are so many of us that have a collection that we're really passionate about and that we want to provide access to. You might, on the other hand, be interested in taking, a history project that you're already developing, maybe an ethnomusicology project, something like that, and providing public outreach, public access to the historical content thinking very broadly about the public, right? So then you can go through our digital projects for the public program. Here's an example from Florida Atlantic University, where they were developing an interactive 3D multimedia project to explore the history of the first freedmen's town in South Carolina. And then a last way that we fund the increasing access to humanities content through digital platforms is through a couple of different open book programs that we support, all of which are aimed to taking humanities scholarship and putting it on the internet so that it's freely available and open access. This is just one of those programs, the Fellowship's Open Book Program, where we're funding previous NEH awardees to make their work freely available online. And what's really exciting about that is now new monographs on exciting, cutting edge humanities research is going to be free for you to access. So we've talked about research. We've talked about communications maybe. And then the other area I want to talk about is teaching. So I think all of us right now are really thinking about remote teaching, online education, and developing our pedagogy, developing our platforms, developing digital resources. And the NEH is able to support that work. One of the ways that we support teaching is through our Humanities Initiatives program, which funds a wide range of curriculum development and pedagogy projects. And these programs historically have really been focused on universities that serve underserved populations like community colleges, HBCUs, tribal colleges, and HSIs, but it now has also opened up to any institution. So as of last year, any institution can apply for one of these grants. Here's an example from Florida of Indian River State College, and they were funded for a 2-year project that will create new digital course modules on Florida's African American history. So building out online educational resources. This program also historically has funded things like the development of a digital humanities minor or something like that at your institution. And then another way that we support teaching is through our Humanities Connections program. Here's an example from the University of South Florida. So Humanities Connections is for curriculum development that is specifically interdisciplinary and aims to bring the humanities into interaction with things like the social sciences or things like computer science. The example that I have to show you here is actually the development of an interdisciplinary core educational pathway called Medical Humanities in a Global Context. So that's not digital humanities per se, but we have also seen programs that have a specific digital humanities component under this grant program. Okay. So there's no way for a summary of everything we fund at the NEH to not be really overwhelming. I tried to kind of like simplify and clarify, focus in on the areas that I think you're interested in, things like research, teaching, and publishing. But of course, like I said, we have over a dozen programs that can fund different areas of digital humanities. And so the last thing that I really wanted to talk about today before I think I've left plenty of time for us to have a conversation is I really wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to work with the NEH and how we can help you support your projects. So there are two sort of primary things that we can do. We can offer you professional development, and we can fund your research or teaching or whatever. So one area that the NEH funds is something called an Institute for Advanced Topics in the Digital Humanities. I know some people on this call have run these before. So these are intensive learning programs for faculty, for staff, for students, for librarians, for archivists. All kinds of people can attend these institutes. They're fully funded by the NEH, and they're on specific topics relating to digital humanities. The goal is to give people professional development. So one example here from UCF, Understanding Digital Culture, Humanist Lenses for Internet Research, was a 5-day institute, 25 participants, using on the topic of using digital methods in order to research digital culture. But we fund tons of these, like 5 a year, so I guess it's not really tons, but we fund a bunch of these, and in lots of different topics. Active programs right now include text analysis pedagogy, new languages for natural language processing, cultural analytics, spatial archaeology, crowdsourced transcriptions, advanced digital editing, military history, and communities of practice. You probably missed the deadline to sign up for these for this year, but you can apply for these for next year, see what's available, and you can, participate in these and develop your own skills as digital humanists. And then the other thing we can do, of course, is we can fund your digital projects. I know that what it means to apply for an NEH project or award can be very opaque. So the last thing that I wanted to do in this talk was just to kind of walk you through what happens once you apply, so that you have a picture, and then sort of what strategies you can use to be successful here. So for me, NEH application process starts when you contact us. We really encourage all applicants, especially first-time applicants, to contact a program officer or program staff, set up a meeting, have a 30-minute conversation about your project and how well it fits. We can help you figure out if you're applying to the right grant program or not. And we can help you figure out how to structure your proposal in a way that will make it as competitive as possible. We also, most of our grant programs offer draft review. So if you write a draft of a proposal, send it to us by a certain deadline, we will provide feedback and give you advice. Then you submit your application. We go through 2 or 3 weeks of sorting and checking applications for eligibility. In the Office of Digital Humanities, because our programs are so interdisciplinary, sorting is actually super hard. We usually have 6 different peer review panels, and they're on interdisciplinary topics like spatial humanities and cultural heritage. So it can be quite complicated to kind of figure out, based on the proposals that we've received, how to organize them. We put together peer review panels of 5 experts who cover everything from, the preservation and sustainability of projects to the historical content to the digital technology, right? So pretty diverse peer review panels. Reviewers read every proposal, they write feedback on every proposal, then they come together and discuss most of the proposals, and then they evaluate the proposals. Based on those evaluations, we make recommendations. We never have enough money to fund every good project. We just don't have enough money. So it's always a really difficult process to make recommendations, and it's one of the hardest parts, that we just can't support all the great work that's being done. After that, and this is the first time I've given this talk since the new administration. So after that, proposals go to our National Council. Members of National Council are appointed. They're usually experts, senior scholars of various kinds from around the country, appointed by the President of the United States to oversee our processes. They review our decisions, and they can make recommendations based on what we've recommended or in counter to what we have recommended. And so you can imagine how the nature of the administration impacts the priorities of our National Council and the decisions that they make. I really like to highlight this because it demonstrates that, when you're writing a proposal, your audience is me, but your audience is also our peer review panel and also our national council. So you're really speaking to 3 different groups. And then the final thing that happens is that our chairperson makes a decision. Right now, we don't have a chairperson. Our, chair resigned on January 20th. We have not yet been appointed a new chair. We expect that will happen. In the meantime, we do have an interim chair, so things will be moving forward. But that's one of the things that happens, I think, when you're a federal agency. So we are a little bit up in the air about what's going to happen there. After the decisions go out, like I said, lots of programs don't get funded. This is super normal. And so we recommend, you contact us and we will send you your peer review evaluations. You can read those. You can talk to us about them. We will discuss the feedback with you if you'd like, and then you can decide whether or not to reapply. It's not always the right choice to reapply, but we are here to support you, and it is really common for someone who isn't funded the first time, to get funded a second or third time. So if you are interested in applying for an NEH grant, recommendations: take a look at our resources that are designed to help you decide which funding program is best. Take a look at our past awards. Every grant we've ever made is in our database online, and you can see a summary of it. In digital humanities, you can also see a white paper that describes everything they've done. This is a great way to see, whether your project fits in our program and how to frame it so that it sounds like it fits. And then once you've done those things, you can contact me or any of our staff, and we will work with you to figure out the details of your application. Okay, so that was what I wanted to share. Like I said,
Hannah,
yeah.
when you